Hey folks, today I'll be reviewing another game submitted via our Patreon page, and this game is actually going to be a pretty good illustration of some of the strategic dangers that white faces when playing the advanced French. Now, I remember one of my very first games against the French, when my opponent played e6. I hadn't really seen this opening too much before, so I played d4, d5, and I went for the advance with e5. And very quickly, my center came under heavy fire. Black played c5, knight c6, queen b6, brought the other knight out to f5. And I was really suffering because I had no idea how to defend this d4 pawn. So, of course, when you play the advanced French and you take a lot of space out of the opening, that's kind of white's main concern, is making sure that you're able to defend these pawns. But what we'll see in the game is white actually facing a different kind of strategic danger, one where white doesn't really do much with their space advantage and initiative out of the opening, and because black is able to achieve some of their strategic goals, white eventually just ends up in a worse position. So let's pull it back and take a look at how this opening actually played out. We actually start off as a Sicilian, and then the players eventually transpose. After knight f3, black plays a6, the O'Kelly Sicilian. White plays c3, one of many good responses to it. e6, d4, d5, and here white plays e5, and we've gotten our advanced French, where black has already played this move a6, perhaps not the most useful move in the position, but one that is logical and can be followed up. By the way, I should note that this was a classical game, the time control of 90+30, played over the board, submitted here by Spence playing white. And I believe these are approximate OTB ratings given, with 1700 for Spence and 1840 for the opponent. So here, black plays the move bishop to d7. This is one of the ways black tries to justify this early a6 move, is looking to trade off the bishops with bishop to b5. And I took a look at this one. This is a real line. It's been played quite a number of times. And it makes a lot of sense, of course. From black's point of view, the light square bishop is often a problem piece in the French defense. And if black is able to trade it off and even open the a file in the process, black can solve a lot of problems right from the get-go. That said, nothing in this game is free. Of course, this takes a lot of time for black to do this, and white can use this time, I think, to generate a bit of an advantage. So white here played bishop to e2. I think this is one of several good moves in the position. Bishop d3 is also interesting, and I'll just briefly show the idea behind this one. If black were to continue in the same fashion with takes, and bishop b5, as happens in the game, well, here white could actually go ahead and play bishop to c2. I was analyzing this one. It's quite an interesting move. The point is, of course, okay, this is a little bit annoying. We're not able to castle, but we're keeping our space advantage. We're not trading off any pieces from white's point of view, which is very important. And white's plan is just to bring out the knight with knight c3, hit the bishop on b5. And even if we're not able to castle, actually, the fact that white's space advantage has gone unchallenged, I think, is pretty important here. And white can follow up with h4, h5, develop the bishop out to g5 or to e3, queen on d2. And this king can actually stay on e1 for quite some time. White can even castle queenside in some positions, or eventually castle by hand. And I actually think this position is quite promising for white. So this one is an interesting choice, just avoiding the trade and getting ready to bring the pieces out without castling. But what Spence does in the game, bishop e2, is also very natural. And now black follows up with their idea of c takes d4, c d4, and bishop to b5. So black is achieving something here with the trade of light square bishops, but of course, again, this comes at the cost of time, and white needs to use this time to come up with some kind of advantage, either a lead in development or something else. So I think there's a couple different ways for white to play this one. You could take on b5 here and try to play against this pawn, maybe something like knight c3. Black would push b4, you can drop the knight back to e2, and eventually try to target this pawn by bringing the knight around to d3. I think this is one option. Maybe white is slightly better here. More natural, I think, would be to play knight to c3, and in the game white can do this as well. But the real idea is that after black takes on e2, which of course they're going to do, to recapture with the knight on e2. In the game we see Spence taking with the queen, which feels very natural, but then white doesn't actually end up doing anything with the space. Whereas knight takes e2 prepares to transfer the knight closer to the king side, and this knight can put a lot of pressure on black's position. It also kind of opens things up for white to use the c file a little bit faster. Now let's go to the game, because in the game white castled. Now I think black should actually take on e2 right away and force white to take with the queen. Black played knight c6, white now plays knight c3, bishop takes e2, and once again white gets this critical choice whether to take with the queen or take with the knight. And at first glance, I would say this is definitely not an obvious choice. It does make sense to play queen takes e2, and then maybe try to play for a plan of like knight a4 and bringing the knight to c5. I think this would be one way to play it, but knight takes e2 here is probably the stronger choice. And in this exact position, the point here is that when black is trying to develop, let's say with knight ge7, black has already solved a very important issue. They've traded off the light squared bishops. So if black is able to develop here, knight f5, bishop e7, h5, castle, and get everything out, then black is going to be perfectly fine and in fact very, very comfortable. So white needs to, again, use their lead in development, use their lead in having more time, and try to make something out of it, try to prevent black from being able to develop comfortably. So something like knight to g3 here. And now this is stopping knight to f5, because if black plays this one, the structure is going to be quite weak. White can play for rook e1 and queen d3 and look for an e6 break. And again, white is way ahead in development here and should try to make something out of this. But if black doesn't play knight f5, it's hard to come up with another move here, as black is not really able to develop. And white is going to play bishop g5 next, queen d2, just connect rooks and start bringing everything in. So this was kind of the one way to prevent black, I think, from fully developing comfortably. In the game, we see queen takes e2, black goes knight e7, bishop e3, knight f5, and I think black is already more than fine. Now white can play g4 at some moment and kick the knight, but black will just trade it off, play bishop e7, castles, and again, because black has traded off a couple of minor pieces here, white's base advantage means very little, and black is absolutely fine. In the game, we actually see things go from equal to worse for white. At this point, things are totally fine, but as it often happens in this kind of position, once one side is more comfortable, the trend starts growing and growing in their favor, and slowly black just takes over the position. Now white plays h3, castles, and g4. I think this one is pretty weakening. I think it ends up really not working out. It is playable, but we can start to see kind of the beginning of white's issues in this game. So black plays knight takes e3, f takes e3, and now f5. I would say another very critical moment here for the middle game. Maybe f5, definitely not an accurate move. Now white takes on f6, so it doesn't end up mattering too much, but probably black should have played f6 instead of f5, because here, okay, white really doesn't want to allow black to take on e5, whereas in the game after f5, white certainly did not have to take en passant here, and Spence points out in his notes, should have just ignored this one with a move like king to h2, where if we get some kind of structure like this, f takes g4, hg, it's actually not that bad for white. Not so easy for black to take advantage of white's weakened king. The center is still under white's control, and white even has a plan of like rook h1, king g2, and trying to use the h-file. So this would have actually been not worse for white at all, and in fact white should have gone for this one, which is why I think, okay, black should have played f6. This would have been a lot more accurate in giving black the better game, where here white is forced to take, and we get the same position as in the game with ef6. And bishop takes f6. So after f5, white takes en passant, definitely not the best. Bishop takes f6, and here things just continue sliding downhill. Knight a4. A very natural move, white is trying to get some active counterplay in the position with knight to c5, but black's play here is simply stronger. Queen e7, knight c5, e5. All of a sudden the position is opening up, the center is opening up, and it's white's king on g1 that's kind of paying the price. Somewhat surprisingly, the game really doesn't last much longer. The players trade on e5, and now the position has totally opened up. White's king on g1 here feeling very vulnerable, and yeah, black plays very well here to convert the game. Knight d3, bishop d4, putting pressure on the e-file. White trades rooks and tries to defend, but yeah, this is such a critical weakness now in e3. The bishop on a7, such a strong piece. White's chances of surviving this are very, very minimal, especially with the king side weaknesses. And yeah, the game didn't last much longer. a3, queen e4, knight f2, and after bishop to b8, it was pretty much game over here. Rook h1, check, bishop a7, and white resigned, as yeah, everything is just totally collapsing. So kind of surprising how quickly things went downhill there for white, but we can kind of start to see the wheels falling off starting around here once white plays h3 and g4. At this point, like I mentioned, black is already very, very comfortably equalized, getting all of their pieces out. White wasn't able to really make anything out of their space advantage. And now white is starting to take on a lot of risk, creating weaknesses in their position. Black correctly starts fighting back on the king side, maybe doesn't execute it in the best possible way. Once again, f6 I think was a better way to do it. But once black breaks with e5, things get very, very difficult and quickly go downhill from here. So this game kind of nicely shows that the onus is often on white in these positions, because as you're taking on a lot of space, you're also extending, and you do run the risk of overextending if you don't do anything with that space advantage. If you give black time to develop their pieces and get everything out, and as we saw in this case, black was able to trade off their bad bishop and just put everything on its perfect square. As we can see, the game can very, very quickly turn in black's favor. So if you are going to play the advanced French or similar types of openings where you're taking on a certain element of strategic risk, of course, you have to understand that, and you have to be willing to follow up and play actively and play sharp chess and really fight for the initiative from the get-go. And that's why you see a lot of really sharp attacking players attracted to openings like the advanced French. Guys like Grischuk, Shirov, Nakamura, they've played this opening quite a bit because they're able to follow it up with really aggressive, really attacking play. All right, guys, that's going to wrap it up for this video. Hopefully you found it instructive. If you did, please do give it a thumbs up and make sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Hopefully you have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you in the next video. Take care.